Jonathan Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I start off by saying in my opening remarks just acknowledgement of those people in the chamber who are from Pike River, and also I'd like to also acknowledge the family of Michael Caine, who may be here as well, a worker who lost his life in New Plymouth. Sir, can I just say in terms of remarks of the process which the Select Committee worked through, that this indeed is a very complex and a very large piece of legislation, and by and large we worked very well to progress this. There were obviously points of difference. There were points, sir, and amendments that Labor members brought to the committee which we agreed to. So, sir, it has not been about politics. It's been about producing something that is workable and best for New Zealand. So we know in Part 1, Clause 3, when it talks about the purpose of this bill, the purpose of this Act is to provide a balanced framework. And that's been at the very intent, the very beginning of what it's all about. It's about having a piece of legislation that is proportionate to the risk. And so out in the media world, there's been a lot of misinformation. There's been people saying, so an insurance company of people who work in an office of over 25 will have a health and safety rep. I know that's Part 3, we're going to come to that in due course. But a team of miners who are maybe 7 or 8 don't have a health and safety rep. So there's been all of this conjecture and debate taking place out into Greater New Zealand. And so I'm just thankful that the Minister today has come and tabled that list, which he promised he would do in his second reading speech, which starts to identify the high risk industries, sir, which starts to identify the high risk industries where there will be those mandatory health and safety reps. And we've always known that that process will take place. And it's not in the primary legislation because those lists need to be updated from time to time. And we want to have flexibility around law setting. Sir, having a balanced framework is about many aspects of work life. It's having the responsibility of the PCBU, the person conducting the business or undertaking, having their responsibilities. It's also about the worker fulfilling their responsibilities. It's also having measures in place that are proportionate to the risk. So there will be companies, businesses that will have 3 people involved. And so one may be the PCBU and the others perhaps are all workers. What this bill puts in place is that every business or undertaking has a legal obligation to have engagement with their workforce and to have participation with their workforce around a health and safety regime in that workplace that protects the workers and also protects every person that comes into that workplace. So when my colleague Phil Twyford states that, so there's 25% of the workforce who will have no safety, no health or safety around them, or they're carved out, that's not correct. It's not correct. You went on to say in your second statement around, worker representation. Sir, Mr. Chair, this bill is very strong that there's an obligation upon every workplace, upon every PCBU to have health and safety regime and understandings and procedures in place that incorporates engagement with their workforce at a very meaningful level. Sir, in fact, this bill puts in the provision that if somebody contravenes this section, that for an individual, there is a fine not exceeding $20,000 or any other person, when it's referring to a person, it's talking about a company. Mr. Chair.
I'm going to call Jonathan Young.
For any other person, a fine not exceeding $100,000. Sir, those are very strong measures. They're very strong measures to ensure, sir, that businesses put in place a health and safety regime. So I'm very pleased to acknowledge the work, for example, of the Independent Task Force headed by Rob Yeager and represented right across the work spectrum, unions as well as and high hazard industries, who looked at a whole number and raft of measures that are incorporated in this bill. Sir, the balanced framework, because this is what this bill starts talking about, a balanced framework, is a framework that is workable for New Zealanders and for New Zealand businesses. You know, it's not selling out, it's not going weak at the knees, but it's having a regime, having a legislation and a framework of law that people can understand, that they can work with, that they can apply to their workplaces, that's not tick box, but encourages a whole culture change, where it's not only the employers and the managers, sir, but it is the workers. That not just the worker representative, and I'm not saying that that person is not important in the mix of things, but it's saying that every single worker has a part to play. And this is the culture change that we need. This is where everybody thinks that what is it to keep myself safe and my workmates safe? What is it that's needed in this surrounding, this situation with this industry that I'm working in? And that's what we want to encourage. And that is very central to what this bill is about, because it's engagement and it's effective participation. None of that has ever been changed. It's at the nub, the very essence of this bill. And so I believe that when we look at this balanced framework, we've got to acknowledge, sir, that there are industries that are high risk and there are industries that aren't. And sir, it is not one size fits all. It is what fits for that industry to make it safe for their workers and for people who come into that workplace. And sir, it's important for us to get it right. All that we have heard from the opposition is one size fits all, and we know that it's not. So by and large, we have worked, I think, quite constructively. There's obviously some differences, but from our side, sir, I believe that we have come to a good place, and I'm happy, sir, to defend that position. Thank you.